I am astonished. Hey loser, I am taking care of your wife now, get out of here. My affair told him, hey Reddit, I'm still in shock, even after a few days. So please be patient while I try to put everything that has happened together, even if my life was already complicated, the latest events have completely upended it. My husband's name is Louis, and my name is Vera. My spouse is 27 years old, and I am 26. Although we have been together since childhood, we have only been married for a year or so. We had an extremely good relationship for the most part. We were overjoyed. While Louis worked for a very large company which I will not name for privacy reasons, I had a desk job, a typical 9-to-5 position. He got paid well for his efforts in cybersecurity, but with the birth of our kid, things began to shift. We agreed that I would resign from my job, which was really a placeholder and wasn't paying well, and become a stay-at-home mother while Louis took over as the main provider. Our relationship changed to one that was more conventional, with Louis concentrating on supporting us while I took care of all the household duties. Louis always chose to stay and watch our son whenever he could, doing his best to assist while he was at home by taking on duties. Then, of course, the bills began to mount. You are all aware of how expensive childbirth is in America. Thus, having a child meant additional costs. As a result, Louis started putting in extra hours at work to help us out financially. To spend more time with us, he attempted to work from home, but for some reason, it was not feasible, so he had to continue coming into the office each day. Managing the household and caring for our infant at the same time was a difficulty I had never encountered before, even though I tried my hardest. Having our first child had a negative impact on me. Consequently, Louis and I began to grow apart. The increased obligations overwhelmed us both, and our relationship started to deteriorate. Louis and I began to grow increasingly apart as the months passed. Little adjustments were made at first. Our discussions grew brief and superficial. We were feeling the effects of parenthood and our new duties. I was getting used to working from home full-time, which was a big change from my desk job. I was worn out from all the feedings, diaper changes, and restless nights. Taking care of our infant and running the house felt like too much to handle, and I found it difficult to keep up. Louis was preoccupied with his work. He put in long hours and was frequently too exhausted to be present when he arrived home. Even late at night, he was always deep in business emails or answering calls by the time he arrived at the door. Instead of merely spending time together, our time together became consumed with money, schedules, and responsibilities. Our wonderful sexual life also began to fade. Date evenings became infrequent. Quick suppers and early bedtimes were the norm now. We didn't really spend much time together. It felt forced when we finally did. We were unable to communicate. We chose to ignore or dismiss the problems rather than discuss our emotions. Our emotional distance from one another widened. We began to argue more frequently as we became more preoccupied with our own tasks and less with one another. Minor irritations that we formerly disregarded have grown to be significant sources of annoyance. Louis felt anxious and alienated, and I felt unsupported and undervalued. As the frequency of our disagreements increased, we started to question whether we were still in agreement. The gap between us eventually became too obvious to ignore. We began asking acquaintances or even complete strangers for assistance instead of confiding in one another. Our relationship, which had appeared solid at one point, was now only strained. Without the connection we formerly had, it seemed like we were merely going about our regular lives. I considered complaining but refrained. I secretly believed that I was solely to blame. I could have made a financial contribution and lessened Louis's load if I had a job, but he was handling everything and I felt accountable for the strain on our relationship. Louis made a sincere effort to improve the situation, even though his work obligations made it practically impossible. He began to try to talk to me and be there when he was at home. I found myself resenting him in spite of his efforts. It felt unjust that I was confined to the house taking care of our infant and all the housework, while he was free to leave whenever he pleased. It was a burden for me to consider that he was free to leave it all while I was not. My annoyance with Louis persisted even when our infant got bigger and began to sleep through the night, which helped to relieve some of my fatigue. The resentment was still there. The majority of my time was spent at home, where I felt alone and overburdened by the everyday grind. I avoided him. In part because I thought he didn't really get my difficulties, and in part because I was upset with him for taking a vacation. The distance between us grew, but we never truly addressed it. The resentment persisted even after our baby's sleeping habits changed and my level of weariness decreased. We avoided talking about the important subjects and kept our interactions trivial. We both appeared to accept rather than challenge the growing gap between us. We were unable to heal the emotional breach that had grown between us as we drifted farther away. I started to feel more and more alone and unwelcome. My self-esteem eroded more and more the more I despised Louis. I craved attention from other sources because I felt invisible. I knew in my heart that Louis wasn't totally at fault, but my bitterness clouded my judgment. I would look to other people for the love and attention I required if I couldn't get it from him. In retrospect, I saw how foolish that was. I fell into the arms of someone who seemed to provide everything I was lacking because I needed affection and approval. That's how I fell in love with Mark. I now find it almost comical that Mark and I met at a Comic-Con. Prior to that day, I had never truly attended a Comic-Con. I accepted a friend's invitation because I had nothing else to do. In fact, LS had recommended that I take the day off. He offered to stay at home with the baby while I went out. Saying I needed a break, I went to Comic-Con rather than doing something I truly enjoyed. It was there that I met Mark. It was just a friendly conversation at the start. I told Mark that I knew very little about comics. He said he could suggest some enjoyable ones for me to start with and offered to teach me more. He was attractive and laid back and provided me with the kind of attention I was longing for. Even though I knew it was immoral, I didn't think that simply being friends would be harmful. We were friends at first, but as we spent more time together, I grew to love him. At the time, I didn't regard Mark as cocky, even though I should have known he would be. I believed that his attention to me and kindness were sufficient to captivate me. Our bond blossomed rapidly. The day after we first met, we began texting, and soon I was talking to him on my phone all the time. I told Mark about my everyday life, my dreams, and my frustrations. I had never seen comics before, but Mark recommended that I do so. To be honest, I have no idea why I attended that Comic-Con in the first place, and my regret grows every day. I had been cooped up at home for so long that I had forgotten a lot of my pals. I seized the opportunity when one of them proposed doing anything, even if it wasn't what I usually did. Louis soon realized how engrossed I was in my phone as Mark and I continued to text. I explained to him that it was because I had become interested in and liked TikTok. Although it was a simple way to conceal the truth, it wasn't a complete lie. Mark proposed that we get together outside of texting as we grew closer. I enthusiastically accepted and began discussing hiring a babysitter with LS. Despite his amazement, he consented because he could afford it and the costs weren't as high. I began spending more time with Mark and we hired a babysitter. It was so much fun going out with Mark. To be honest, I had missed being gregarious and energetic. I had vowed to myself that nothing would happen, but I couldn't help but be attracted to Mark. I ended up sleeping with him in spite of my best efforts, and my commitment seemed to have never been made. I'm embarrassed to say that I was really easy for Mark. Any act of kindness from him warmed my heart since I was so in need of love and attention. As if my marriage didn't really matter, we were having a full-fledged affair before I knew it. Ironically, my parents or siblings were more than willing to assist now that our boy was older and no longer a newborn, so I would drop him off with them. The way that transpired is amusing because none of them were willing to help while I was having trouble with a wailing infant. Anyway, I'd go over to Mark's apartment and hang out with him after leaving the kid with them. Dropping off our child wasn't something I could do every day without drawing suspicion. I would occasionally hire a babysitter in place of my family if they couldn't be reached. Louis and I shared an account, but as long as I didn't spend the money extravagantly, he didn't mind. In order to keep Louis from learning about my time with Mark, I used it to pay the babysitter. I believed that I was doing a good job of maintaining the delicate balance, but as I looked back, I saw how stupid and dishonest I had been. I can't help but blame Mark for everything now because he had so many warning signs that I missed. Even though he lived alone and it was obviously safer at my apartment, he insisted on our spending time there rather than at his. In hindsight, it was clear that he was attempting to control me. I didn't realize it until it was too late. but he took pleasure in controlling me and my circumstances. In addition to being extremely jealous, Mark would insist that I repeatedly tell him that he was superior to my husband and would always ask if Louis and I were intimate, even though everything was so absurd. I was so thirsty for his approval and attention that I never stopped to consider the truth. Rather, I allowed myself to become engrossed in his game and disregarded the warning indications that ought to have caused me to stop and reconsider everything. I began to stray from Louis more and more as I became closer to Mark. We had previously been separated, but now it seemed like there was a great distance between us. Ironically, Louis received a significant raise at work at the same time that I was becoming more involved in my affair. Finally, all of the overtime and long hours paid off. He was making a concerted effort to mend our relationship and had more time and money. I was furious. Why couldn't he have earned that promotion when things were just beginning to go wrong? Or before I met Mark, why didn't he attempt to make things better at the time for me? His attempts to make amends came too late. I was too preoccupied with my affair to notice his efforts. I rejected his attempts at intimacy and was not present on our date nights, though I was too preoccupied with my own mess to notice how much I was hurting him. I did nothing about it. I suppose I never made a sincere effort to conceal my affair. Perhaps I didn't think that far ahead. Or perhaps I assumed Louis wouldn't suspect anything. Karma, however, has a way of catching up to everyone, and it did so sooner than I had anticipated. As I already stated, foolish Mark was constantly urging us to visit my home. My parents weren't home that day, so I messaged them to ask if they might watch our son once again, but they had left. I had to take the infant to school because my siblings were at work. I then returned home from the babysitters. Mark and I had a routine where he would come over and wait for me outside after I dropped off the baby. As usual, Mark was waiting for me when I got home. We entered, ate, talked, and then made our way to the living room before going to our bedroom. We had an intimate moment there. I didn't hear the front door open or even a car pulling into the driveway. My spouse opening the door to our bedroom is all I can recall. Neither Mark nor I had considered locking the door. Why would we? We were meant to be the only ones at home. I was stunned when my spouse entered. I still had Mark on top of me. As my husband stood there filming us on his phone, we frantically tried to hide. Mark simply stared at him, labeled him a loser, and told him to get out because he was now taking care of me. I had hoped that he would try to leave or at least join me in begging Louis. It was the most embarrassing thing that had ever happened to me. Everything was exacerbated by Mark's haughtiness and complete lack of compassion, although he was making a concerted effort to conceal it. Louis had always been adept at managing his emotions, so I had never seen him so enraged. He appeared composed, but I could tell he was furious on the inside. Mark's absurd ego made matters worse by attempting to regain control of me as if nothing had occurred. I shoved him away. My thoughts were racing with panic and embarrassment, and my pulse was pounding. And then my husband snapped. He yelled at Mark to leave the house as his composed exterior broke. However, Mark, in his typical haughty manner, simply remained on the bed and instructed Louis to try his hardest. I staggered out of the way and fell to the ground as my husband went at Mark. Louis was too strong for Mark, who was taken by surprise. I was too stunned to stop him from punching me repeatedly. A part of me believed that Mark was deserving of all the blows he was receiving. He had been so haughty and rude, and to be honest, I thought he should pay for his conceit. Mark was unable to defend himself against Louis's constant beatings. Instead, he simply lay there and took the blows. I ought to have stepped in, but I chose not to. What could I do anyhow? And Mark had caused this himself. Louis was gasping for air when he finally stopped. He insisted on knowing the baby's whereabouts. After I told him, Louis hurried out to fetch our son and have a break without saying anything more. Mark was wounded and battered, and I suppose I was left alone with him. I'm tired, so I'll try to get through the rest of the specifics quickly because they're very unimportant. I used Mark's phone to contact his family and summoned an ambulance for him. After the altercation, fortunately, I knew his password, so I called his sister and parents. I was too overwhelmed to stay when they got to the hospital, so I walked out without saying anything. I was frightened and unsure of what to do. All of my belongings were tossed out onto the porch when I returned home. Louis had clearly been busy and had returned home during my absence. It seemed as if I was operating automatically after gathering my belongings and making an Uber call. I made my way to my folks' house before collapsing into my room and just lying there in disbelief. I hardly had time to describe what had happened. I told my folks everything the following day. Louis had never been the kind to use violence, so they were appalled and disappointed. Louis didn't respond when I tried to contact him. After several days of waiting, nothing came of it. I don't know what to do next and am really perplexed. I also contacted the babysitter, who informed me that the child had been picked up by Louis. Since I have nowhere else to go, I'm now turning to Reddit at my parents' house. I feel disoriented and bored. I attempted to get in touch with Mark to check on him, but he hasn't replied either. Although I am aware that my involvement with Mark was a grave mistake, I still feel accountable and want to know how he is doing. I'm still unsure of how to go, and everything still seems to be spinning around me. I'm contacting you now in the hopes of getting some guidance or insight on what to do next. Update: Hello Reddit. I'm not sure I'll be updating this so quickly, but I am. Since I don't write frequently, I'm still learning how to use this site, so I hope I'm doing it correctly. The criticism has been harsh, but to be honest, I anticipated it. The DMs have also been harsh. I've had to dismiss or block the unpleasant messages, but I've made an effort to respond to the nice and inquisitive ones. I don't need any more negativity from strangers on the internet. I'm already dealing with plenty. I've noticed a lot of criticism over our choice to marry and start a family. Some people argue that if we weren't prepared, we shouldn't have had a child. But the truth is that we didn't prepare for it. I believed that my IUD was dependable. I was shocked to learn that I was expecting a child. We were married earlier than we had intended. Since we chose to keep the baby, we were already considering marriage. Even if it wasn't the finest time to do it, having a baby, even if we had planned for one, is very different from merely considering it. Please refrain from criticizing me because I'm not here to be condemned for my decisions. To be honest, I don't have many updates. Mark hasn't contacted me yet, and I'm anxious. I consider visiting the hospital to see how he's doing, but I'm also concerned about the potential consequences. My mind is racing with all sorts of possible outcomes, and it seems like a poor idea. Louis hasn't spoken to me either, according to my parents. They may visit his home to see how the baby is doing and to check on him if he doesn't reply right away. Right now, I'm feeling quite uncertain and afraid about everything for now. I suppose that's all I have. Update: Hello Reddit. I've been using this site as an outlet for a few days now, and I'm growing used to it. I wanted to provide an additional update. Please refrain from making hateful remarks or criticisms. They have no bearing on me. Even a video of my TikTok post with an odd Minecraft backdrop caught my attention. It was enjoyable. Hey Reddit, I don't want anyone I know to find this, so it's been a little unsettling, but whatever. Here's the real update, though. Mark responded to me at last. He informed me that he was doing well, but his initial reaction was a voice message in which he shouted at me. Louis is fine save for some bruises from breaking his nose and twisting his ankle, though I'm still not sure if I should. I promised Mark that I would come and attempt to work things out. I haven't heard from LS yet. My parents went to see how the baby was doing and to see how he was doing. Louis and the baby are doing well, they said. LS informed my parents that he will get in touch with me when he is ready. But for now, he doesn't want to talk to me. Louis wasn't in the mood for a lengthy talk, so my parents left before they could remain. I sincerely hope that LS will appear soon. To be honest, I'm worn out yet still feel like I'm operating automatically. I regret ever meeting Mark and ruining my marriage. I'm simply so perplexed at the moment. I appreciate you reading. Update: Hello Reddit. I haven't posted in a few weeks. I'm sorry for being so quiet up until now. I didn't have anything to say. Here's the most recent. LS eventually showed up. He reacted when I reached out to him once more. I was so glad when he consented to let me come and see the baby. I was really nervous about being without him. I went over there, talked with LS for a while, and spent some time with the baby. Louis said during our talk that he had previously just suspected the affair and had only verified it through our communications. He claimed that I didn't do a very good job of concealing it, and he wasn't sure if he should be glad that he was able to learn about my affair or upset that it seemed like I didn't even care enough to keep it a secret. He informed me that we were done, that he would soon serve me with divorce papers, and that he could never forgive me for seeing me with another man. He also said that, despite his belief that I didn't deserve it, he would give me 40% of our joint account and wanted custody of the child. I first sobbed and pleaded with him. To be honest, I was and still am heartbroken. Although I still adore Louis and hope that, given our history and bond, we may work things out. I declined his offer to take the kid. Ella shouldn't have custody in my opinion. When I proposed that the court split our joint account, LS simply chuckled and indicated that due to our state's stringent divorce laws, I would likely receive nothing. He suggested that I would probably lose custody if it went to court. That may or may not be true. I'll be seeing a lawyer shortly to receive legal guidance, because my parents have scheduled a meeting with him. Even though Mark has been released from the hospital, I haven't gone to see him, despite my parents' advice not to attend. I'm thinking about it. They believe that following up with him is sufficient, but I believe we should speak in person to resolve this. I appreciate you reading, and when I have more, I'll post again. Additional details have been updated. Hello Reddit. In order to get more information, I wanted to hold off on updating you guys. Here's the current situation after a few weeks. At last, I went to see Mark. Louis definitely took a toll on him. He appeared to be somewhat wounded. We spoke, and to be honest, Mark hasn't changed. Despite his continued haughtiness, it appeared that Louis's actions had damaged his ego. Mark claimed he never wanted to see me again and blamed me for everything. He said he should have known better than to become involved with me and that I was to blame for everything. I should be grateful he wasn't going to the police, he even remarked. I was at a loss for words. After apologizing and pointing out that his haughtiness contributed to the incident, I departed. I honestly don't intend to have any more relationships with him, so this is probably the last time I'll see him. He was correct about the legal status of Louis, according to a lawyer I spoke with. My state has quite stringent rules. Louis may lose primary custody of the child simply because he had proof that I had cheated. The lawyer said that since opposing Louis's offer would probably have severe consequences, I should take it. Louis had offered more than even possible alimony would. I contacted Louis to let him know that I had changed my mind and that, should I be served, I would sign the documents without objecting or contesting them. That's the current situation. When I'm served or have more information, I'll update once. More update, I suppose. Hello Reddit. I was served at last. Louis did it himself, and to be honest, when I read those documents, I wasn't sure how to react. It was all such a blur. But I believe I shed a tear or two. I simply recall feeling totally numb as I sat there and stared at the materials. I then took a long nap. Perhaps to try to get some rest in the middle of the pandemonium, or perhaps to escape the overpowering truth of it all, even though it may seem futile. I feel the need to share everything right now, even if it sounds like I'm just dumping all these things. The entire procedure has been really exhausting. Naturally, I should have anticipated that Louis would not just remain silent about the evidence he possessed. He went all out and shared it with everyone we knew, including the group chat from my family, all of our friends, and even some people we didn't know well. My phone has been inundated with calls and messages all the time. I'm having trouble keeping my composure since it's so overwhelming. I'm furious that Louis made sure everyone understood exactly what had happened and didn't simply abandon me. He didn't even let me know or give me an opportunity to clarify. He seemed to want everyone to see me at my lowest point. He hasn't responded to any of my irate emails asking for clarification and answers. I'm totally exhausted. The whole thing is draining. I'm barely able to function. In addition to navigating this legal issue with Louis and coping with the aftermath from the affair, I'm also facing humiliation in public. Furthermore, Louis goes out and publicly reveals everything just as I was beginning to hope that we could at least have a cordial conversation or even find some common ground. This public humiliation seems to be an additional layer of betrayal, compounding the grief from the affair. It's difficult to comprehend how close we were at one point and how drastically things are now unraveling. I can't stop wondering what may have been and how things might have turned out if we had taken a different approach. Now, though, I suppose it's all public knowledge. Everything seems to be collapsing and I'm simply too exhausted to handle it. I'm not even sure what I should do next right now. I'm simply trying to get by each day. But I'm hoping that time will help. Update. It's me again, Reddit. I never imagined that I would be updating, but here I am. It has taken me some time to get back into this account after I was locked out and lost the password. I think I should provide you all an update. The divorce has now been finalized. I just don't know what to say. It has been a setback sometimes. I'm fine, and other times I'm not. I'm simply worn out. Fortunately, Lewis had agreed to give me 40% of our joint account. At least I have some financial stability because it's a respectable sum of money. Lewis was granted custody of the child. I signed the papers, so that's what happened even though I had hoped for joint custody. On the weekends and during visits, I get to see the infant. One little relief is that there are no debts to divide. I'm also getting over the fact that Lewis's parents gave him the house as a college graduation present, so it was his before we were even married. I'm having trouble finding a job. It's difficult for me to concentrate because I'm feeling so down about everything. In addition, I believe I've become accustomed to being a stay-at-home mother after a while. Lewis is missed. Even though I know it's over and I caused this myself, I still miss what we had. I've been making ends meet with the money I received from the divorce, but I'm considering leaving my current residence. I'm reluctant to leave because my family has been a big assistance, and I'm trapped in autopilot mode. I keep telling myself that it's just a dream and that everything will be all right when I wake up, including Lewis and myself. Lewis may eventually forgive me, my parents keep telling me. But we all know it's a lie and that they're only trying to cheer me up. I suppose I had my just desserts. I'm thinking of deactivating this account because it's been a difficult trip. The hate mail and direct messages have been really annoying. Thank you for your support and for reading.